So in this video, I want to take a look at some of the content that we've created and have a little think about the different ways that we can present information through video when it comes to education. So first, taking a look at this tutorial screencast then. So this is basically just capturing our screen of whether that's a digital piece of software such as CAD or Photoshop or whatever you're using for your educational content. For us, that's musical software that you use to record and produce in. So yeah, basically just coupling that with a live video of someone explaining it. Now with this, I would say obviously you could just hit record on your screen, you could do that content and there would be nothing wrong with that. I think having that kind of aspect of having someone on screen gives you that opportunity to have that connection, that better understanding, you know, and that ability to kind of turn to camera, explain a concept and then come back to the screen. I think personally just makes things a bit clearer, and it feels like you're actually being walked through something rather than just watching someone on a screen. So in terms of what you can see here, this is Chris using a green screen. He's completely cut out and we don't see his background. That was a decision on our behalf in terms of stylistically really, but also we didn't want to take up too much of the screen because these kind of softwares, that can be quite nuanced in terms of the small amounts of detail that you can see. Other options would be things like a circle or a square. It's really, you know, there's obviously no difference. It's just stylistically in terms of what you prefer. One of the things that we often did on all of our kind of online courses, as you can see on this one, is basically have a bottom bar. One, so that it was branded and couldn't be copied, and then also just so that people knew what they were watching.
Starts on a later wavetable. I just need to increase the start time, start point. So as I move this up, you'll notice it's starting higher and higher up the wavetable. And I could also actually change the starting position on the left here in the oscillator itself.
In terms of the equipment and how we record a video like this, obviously we have the screen capture itself, which we can do through various softwares such as ScreenFlow, OBS or QuickTime, which we'll talk a little bit about later. But yeah, recording on our computer, the screen, that's the key thing. One thing that we want to make sure of is that we're recording something like our laptop or our computer's system microphone, so that we have the option of syncing that up at a later date with the camera, with the audio. It's also worth thinking about resolution, so making sure that we're recording the whole screen and also that we're recording in a high resolution, so that if we did want to crop in at a later date, then we can do that. And storage is a really big thing. So these screen recordings, they can take up quite a lot of file size. So just making sure you've got plenty of storage on your hard drive inbuilt, or whether you buy an external hard drive and plug that in to record to that. Aside from that, we have a one camera setup. So I don't think there's really a need for more than two cameras. I think that jump cuts are absolutely fine for when you do make mistakes in these kind of videos. And then we just have one light in here as well. So quite a kind of basic setup really. And then finally, we just have a small lav mic. So we'd sync the lav, the camera and the screen capture together. And then we would look at editing that in post. So next then, taking a look at an interview setup. So for me, I really like that kind of off-camera look. And from experience, I also find that when I'm interviewing someone, it's a lot more comfortable for them to look off camera to an interviewee rather than looking straight down the lens, which can feel a little bit more unnatural. So yeah, in terms of that interview, we would generally set up with an A cam and a B cam. This would allow us to cut between the two for cutting out the questions that an interviewer might be asking, also masking mistakes, also tightening up the edit, so cutting out all the fluff and just making it nice and tight. So you can see here, you know, we have that kind of A cam, B cam, which we're going to talk a lot more about later in terms of the framing and how we would set that up. But yeah, this is two camera setup, two cameras, and generally speaking, you know, maybe two lights, something like that. And then, as is the case with this interview, we might kind of go a bit above and beyond and get what we would call B-roll. So B-roll is basically all the kind of footage that would sit on top of an edit to kind of supplement what our interviewee is speaking about. In order to achieve that B-roll, it might be the case that you ask whoever you're interviewing to kind of send you lots of supplementary material that they already have recorded, or it might be the case that you kind of fake some of it on the day. You know, you've done the interview, maybe you write down a little list about the kind of things that were covered, the topics that were covered. Maybe it's like things like equipment or processes, and then you would kind of go off and maybe film some of those things. The drawback to that is things like clothing and you know, it's difficult to kind of fake and make it look authentic. But yeah, capturing that B-roll for me in terms of the interview, it can really kind of supplement some of the points that are trying to be made. But yeah, I would say that in general, like, an interview is a really great way of extracting information from people who might not be comfortable in front of camera. And you know, it might be the case that you're working with an external expert on a subject. But you know, in education, we don't often have big budgets to pay people. So, you know, having that person design loads of content, creating slides, creating a script, all these things might not be very feasible. But them coming in, you preparing the questions, sitting down for half an hour, asking those questions, it's quite easy to kind of extract core information in a quick way that's quite easy. So yeah, interviews are a really great way of doing that.
I would sort of advise anybody in my position to be cautious about packing in any job that's giving them regular money. But at the same time, you really need to have the time and energy to develop your career. So I think you need to find a good balance, and that's what I was able to do with teaching. I've also had other jobs along the way, and I'm also always thinking ahead about, am I going to need a job to see me through that period where I'm also just writing loads and I'm not gigging? For things like that, I think it's really important.
So this next video is an example of a kind of long form video, and it's a lot more involved in terms of that production. So for this particular video, we interviewed, you know, 2 people that were involved in the project. We were there for the whole day. We filmed obviously lots of B-roll, lots of that footage that sits on top. But we also had a mic on the camera so that we were, you know, capturing elements live. So in this video, it does occasionally kind of cut to live moments. So it's kind of cutting between 2 people interviewed about the day or the event or whatever it is, plus the live footage, plus lots of B-roll. So it's obviously a lot more effort. We've got an A-cam, B-cam for one interviewer, A-cam, B-cam for a different interviewer in a different space with different lighting. And then obviously, you know, on the day kind of following around and getting that footage on something like a gimbal. But yeah, the kind of end product is a much more involved and much more kind of expressive, you know, video.
Amen Brother break is basically a soul music break. I suppose there's a gospel element to it, obviously. It's a beat that's very similar to the same kind of, you know, James Brown kind of grooves, Bernard Purdie. And it's got this floating quality to it. It's not like any rock beat. It's not rooted. It's on its toes. It's very staccato. It's got a springiness to it that makes it so so effective. And like all great drum breaks, it's a moment where the drummer was in such a perfect moment of flow that he wasn't thinking, he wasn't trying to get it right. He was just in a pure moment of playing in a way that was captured. And that's it, it's perfect. You can take any little piece of it and it divides exactly perfectly in time. And he wouldn't have been thinking that. He was just playing purely from within and it got captured. That's what makes those things so exciting.
So the Amen break was captured in 1969. We don't know a lot about the recording itself, but we did manage to catch up with the sound engineer at the time, a guy called Rodney Mills, and he was able to tell us what he was using in that studio at the time regarding microphones and compressors.
So here, this is what I would call a kind of demonstration video. The key thing being here is that the person is speaking to camera, and that we're creating kind of lots of supplementary shots to express what someone's talking about. So the idea is that this does look live, but I would say, you know, that when I was creating these kind of videos, you're often doing what I would call pickups. So you've done the walkthrough, someone's explained a concept or how to use something physical, and then you both kind of retrace your steps in order to capture all those moments, but you've come in with the camera and you've kind of punched in Alongside that, it's also an A-cam, B-cam situation for the same reasons we've discussed before. So when your subject fluffs, or when you want to make something a bit tighter because maybe they were over egging a point or something, yeah, A-cam, B-cam gives us that opportunity to kind of cut between the two.
So on this amp, you've got a reverb effect, you've got a tremolo effect, and you've got a basic DI. So you can really kind of manipulate the tone. But unlike our Blackstar amp, you haven't got the different models of distortions and the modulation delays.
So this here is a really good example of top-down video. It might be the case that it's not actually that important that we see who's speaking, and it might be more important that we see what's physically going on. So top-down video is a really great way of doing that. In terms of how we would achieve that, you basically get tripods, specific tripods that can kind of go up and edge over. C-stands are also a really good option because they're quite heavy duty in terms of being able to achieve it. And then obviously looking at lighter weight cameras. So things like GoPros, they're much easier to rig on ceilings or however you want to do that. So one of the videos that we find ourselves making quite a lot is a live video. So for us, that's kind of our guest lecture series, when we have guests who come into our facilities, but also it's kind of just the concept of capturing a live class, really. So these can be really involved. They can involve lots of cameras if it's quite technical and there's a lot of gear involved. A lot of audio equipment for us, then we might involve the kind of top-down as well as other cameras. But generally speaking, it's about having at least 2 cameras so that we can do that kind of cut to A to B to make the edit tighter. Generally speaking, we would look at having a mid, a wide, and possibly a close as well. But yeah, it definitely varies in terms of different lectures and how much we want to kind of throw into it. But yeah, using the same techniques, we'll often provide a wireless lav for our guest speaker or guest speakers, and then we'll have the cameras, and we'll normally rig up a bit of lighting as well. Often another factor with this is the capture of slides. So if the guest or if the teacher is doing a presentation, we'd often do a screen recording using QuickTime, OBS or ScreenFlow, as we've previously mentioned. But also maybe just ask guests for their slides directly, whether it's on Google or PowerPoint, and then we can actually edit those in post.
With Hammer, again, like I was warming up for him at Lakota, he really, both of those times, they could tell that I had, taken this warm-up gig seriously. And we got chatting afterwards, and then he introduced me to my now current agent. So those were 2 pretty instrumental things that, by taking them seriously, it led to other things.
So the final way that we present information, which isn't video per se, is e-lectures. And these are a really great way of giving the kind of ownership in the person that's consuming the information to go at their own pace. So it's basically embedded Google Slides with an audio voiceover. So per slide, we attach an audio voiceover, and then they can actually interact with these slides on our VLE. So yeah, it's not video, but it is a really great way to present information.